Hi, my name is Don Patton. I'm chair of the Old Protestant Burying Ground Foundation. We are in the Old Protestant Burying Ground in Charlottetown, 4.5 acres in the city, laid out in 1784. The cemetery was open until 1873 when it was completely full and they opened a new one out of town. We're having tonight an open house, if you will. We're calling it a summer social, and we'll learn about the cemetery. There'll be music, there'll be a piper, and here are the Fathers of Confederation joining us, and games for children.
It's a pleasure. Colonel John Hamilton Gray, yes, Premier of this island. It's all right.
Happens to the best of us.
Oh, thank you very much. Great to see you.
Bryon Howard.
So, hi.
Pleasure.
John A. McDonald?
No, Colonel John Hamilton Gray,
Colonel
my
John
goodness.
Gray Hamilton.
That rascal John A. is about somewhere, but that's not me.
The Right Honourable Edward Palmer, Attorney General here in Prince Edward Island.
Well, pleased to meet you. It's a
Pleasure is
pleasure.
mine.
Well,
Are you a constituent of the island, sir?
Well, I'm visiting from Calgary.
Rupert's Land.
Rupert's Land, yes, I do believe Calgary is in Rupert's Land.
Rupert's Land.
Yes, I've travelled long and far.
Long and far, yes.
Dodging, I would imagine.
Carl, you do a lot of the maintenance here, right?
Yes, I do.
Nice. It's looking great.
To meet them, the parents, you will wish to know, the parents of both of these historic personages are buried here in the Old Protestant Burying Ground. I would now invite the fathers to come forward.
Not familiar with this device, but I hear it amplifies my voice, so I will speak into it. Of course, I am the Right Honourable Edward Palmer, Attorney General here in Prince Edward Island and former Premier, and perhaps I would...
Well, I am the Honourable Colonel John Hamilton Gray, and of course the current Premier of Prince Edward Island. And I have been welcoming the Canadian guests that have been here to enjoy this conference on this possibility of uniting in a grand confederation. This is an ideal that I am certain my parents, Martha and Robert, being good islanders themselves, would support. So I would hope that everyone here with us this evening can join in that support with me and pray for many years of this Canadian country to come.
Surely as true islanders, like all of you are, you will know that confederation is not good for this island. I do believe, and I would support, that we should not join this confederation scheme. They propose ridiculous...
Yes, well, Mr. Palmer here is quite stubborn. He's been difficult to convince, certainly, but the delegates from Canada East and West
scarce, but there remains one stone for an interment before 1800, and it's that black stone right behind me. That stone is for Isabella Bell, the young wife of Sgt Neil Bell, who was a member of the 21st Grenadiers and died in 1789. The sign and material of the stone is very similar to those found in the old burying ground in Halifax, as well as many New England burying grounds. The first indication that this site was a cemetery was in 1784, where it was shown on a floor. This burying ground came into general use after 1800, with about 50 burials between 1800 and 1810. It was organized, just how it was organized then and administered is not known. In 1826, the land grant was made to St. Paul's Anglican Church by Honorable George Wright, my great-great-grandfather again, who was acting governor at the time. The land remained deeded to St. Paul's Church until the year 2000, when St. Paul's deeded it to the Old Protestant Burying Ground Incorporated. The 5 original churches in Charlottetown assisted St. Paul's in its minimum maintenance, and the sextons of St. Paul's controlled the burials, opened and closed the graves, and kept the records. And it was from these burial records that we get a great deal of our information. The charge for opening and closing a grave was 1 shilling for an adult, less for a child. After the currency changed to dollars, that amount was 80 cents. After some negotiations, the cemetery was made available to all Protestant denominations. According to the local press, every 30 or 40 years, the cemetery would become in dire need of repairs, fencing, tidying up, and then there'd be campaigns launched to do the work. As we celebrate Canada's 150, here at the Old Protestant Burying Ground, we celebrate the fact that the cemetery's been closed for almost 150 years. The cemetery was closed December 31st, 1867, the year Prince Edward Island became part of Canada. It is obvious this closing date we would not have Fathers of Confederation buried here, but we do have several mothers and fathers of the Fathers of Confederation, namely the parents of George Coles, John Hamlin Gray, Thomas Haviland, Edward Palmer, William Pope. We'll visit some of these locations later on. The current restoration program began in 1998 when then Mayor George MacDonald persuaded Dr. Gordon Matheson to organize a committee to work on restoring the cemetery, and the rest is history. An active committee raised funds for the restoration, studied the history, compiled records of all the interments, so that what we see tonight is a well-kept, peaceful park-like area with most stones erect. This is in place of what you would have seen 20 years ago, with the grounds growing up in bushes, many stones on the ground and broken, and the site known as a favorite drinking spot for many people. Now I want to take a few moments to talk about the stones. The majority of the stones are of Wallace sandstone quarried from a site in Wallace, Nova Scotia. This is the same material used in Province House and Confederation Centre. There are a lot of stones of white marble, and the thinner slabs of white marble were not very durable. We think also there's likely some island sandstone used, and they have long gone disappeared. People are interested in vaults and sarcophagi. The individual sarcophagus is simply a box-type monument on top of a grave. Some people expect to find a body inside that, but that is not the case. It's simply a monument. As part of our research and education about the Old Protestant Burying Ground, we have researched various sources and compiled a list of 3,200 interments, although we think that somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 burials have taken place here. I hope I've raised enough interest in you that you may want to purchase the book published on the history called Who Departed This Life, and you will note that it's the most common phrase on tombstones here. Who departed this life, and the date. The book contains also 80 biographies of both humble and prominent people. Following the refreshments, I'll be leading a tour around the cemetery, starting in the Potter's Field, which is over in that corner. And in conclusion, I want to express our thanks and appreciation to the City of Charlottetown for recognizing this historic and sacred spot for what it is and for their assistance in maintaining it. I encourage all citizens to visit here, come here often, and reflect upon those that came before us. Thank you very much.
Gordon's big effort.
It was the last public hanging in Canada, and it was a fiasco from the start. The first time they dropped him, the rope broke. The next time they dropped him, his feet hit the ground. The rope flew off. And then he finally was strung up and done in. But that's the story of George Downey.
Terrible.
but the stone we're going for is up here.
Did Mr. Gray, did you know Mr. Palmer?
I am Mr. Palmer. Thank you for remembering.
These are your parents?
Yes.
Wow.
Lawyer and a politician, I took after my father, and I named my first daughter Minnie after my mother.
Huh.
How many children did you have?
8.
Good, 8.
Currently. There are no plans for more.
This is a pile of rubble when we started. This is to Anna Marie Jarvis. And the stone was, the sarcophagus was ordered from England. And we have a letter that he wrote to his sister telling him about ordering the stone with the exact that he was born in New Brunswick. He came here from Malta, where he was a judge in Malta, and came from Malta to here to be judge, and lived out the rest of his life here. His first wife died, and he married his first wife's best friend, and she had always said that this other lady would succeed her. We're told that the early Presbyterians used symbols very similar to the Star of David, and that's what this obviously is. Were the two people that were carried off by the Americans when they invaded Charlottetown. And Calbeck stayed in Halifax. It was in the fall. There's no way they could get back to the island until the winter was over. Thomas went back to England and came across in the spring, where Calbeck stayed in Halifax and came over whenever. But you can imagine their families not having no idea what became of them. The Havilands, the Grays,
talked about in his comments, back in 1998, Mayor George MacDonald struck a committee, and Reverend Matheson was the chair. Clive Stewart was the vice president. Kenneth Mackenzie was the secretary. George Wright was the treasurer, and there was a number of board of directors. Bobby Shepherd, who was here tonight, was one of them. The restoration, which began in 1998, was a tremendous challenge. But the work that's gone into this restoration project is truly phenomenal. And there's no words that can really capture accurately the work that's gone into this project, this restoration. Come forward, Carl.